Thank you so much, everyone. So as Candace mentioned, my name is Gabby Parent-Doliner, and I am the program manager with for SwimGuide with Swim Fish Canada. Nope, just going to move the slides forward. Okay, so some of you might have heard of us, Fish, but for those of you that don't know us, Fish Canada has been working for a swimmable, drinkable, fishable future since our launch in 2001. So we blend science, law, education, storytelling with technology and to empower millions of people to know and safeguard their waters. Fish operates 7 initiatives, including my program, the Swim Guide, and each of these initiatives has a specific mission that contributes to the goal of building a national movement of active, informed, engaged individuals working to ensure their communities can swim, drink, and fish forever. So first, why is Fish spending so much energy and attention to data management and open data when our mission is swimmable, drinkable, fishable water? So data management, as most of you know, is not often at the forefront of discussions about recreational water quality monitoring. I just came back from Denver, and I think I've been at a lot of conferences, and I spend my days working with beach monitoring programs, and I think we've all seen there's been amazing, great strides in recreational water quality monitoring programs, as well as the processing methods, so including rapid processing methods. We've seen real-time monitoring, predictive modeling. However, there's been little literature, guidance, or discussion related to data management in general, and that's related to the recreational water quality data produced by these programs. Even the basic Beach 101 workshops and so forth that are offered by recreational water quality managers, they focus primarily on the sample collection, processing, and communicating results to the public. And there's little attention dedicated to data management and storage options. So it's what we're going to focus on today is really it's an introduction to open data. So I'm going to introduce you to what open data is and why it's important. And specifically, I'll talk about the importance and the impact of open recreational water quality data. I'm going to introduce you to our open data standard, the Swim Fish open data standard for the automated exchange of recreational water quality data. And finally, I'll try to tackle the challenges of working with recreational water quality data. And I'm going to provide some tips and some guidance on some easy things you can do to open your own data. So first, let's start with just the basic definition of open data. So open data is defined as structured data that is machine readable, freely shared, used, and built upon without restrictions. The goal is interoperability. And for those of you that some of these terms are new, interoperability is essentially when a data set is interoperable, it addresses this ability of the systems and services that create and exchange and consume data to have a clear shared expectations for the content, the context and the meaning of that data. So I really like to give some metaphors on this, especially if it's a new concept. So if you think about it as your own language, how many languages do you know? And when you're going to speak to somebody else or come in communication with somebody that doesn't speak your language, that could pose some barriers. People are really, really good at being interoperable. We find ways to communicate even though there are barriers. So if you think of interoperability, it's that ability to kind of break through any barriers, limitations on that exchange of information. So with open data, the creation of value depends on the ability to share the data, to make it available to third parties rather than on sheer volume. So open data is actually, it's fairly new. However, that idea of knowledge for the common good, that's actually a very, very, very old concept. And I'm going to do a little bit of a history lesson because I do think it's important to understand the idea behind open data. So it's not surprising that open data, open knowledge was born in the scientific community. So essentially share your work, share your knowledge, share your findings, your data for the greater good. So the idea that scientific research should be free to all was made popular by a fellow called Robert King Merton in the early 1940s. And essentially the idea was that research which produces data should be shared freely for the common good. So this is long before the concept of open data, like long before being a technical object or political movement. Open data was rooted in the practice of the scientific community and also with librarians. And researchers were essentially the first to perceive the benefits of openness and sharing their own data. So Merton, there's a quote from Merton that says essentially each researcher must contribute to the common pot and give up intellectual property rights to allow knowledge to move forward. So the encounter between the scientific idea and the ideals of free software and open source shaped open data as we know it today. So how are we doing? So I'm going to focus primarily on US and Canada. I'm obviously based here in Toronto, so I have a lot of knowledge of what's going on in Canada and the US. So, and that's where the bulk of our beaches are in Swim Guide. So actually both of our governments, which is fantastic, have made open machine readable data the new default. So in Canada, the open data pilots have been up and running since 2011, and open by default became a directive in 2014. So in the US, it was actually under Obama, his executive order in 2013, was to make open machine readable data the new default in government information. So that's fantastic. And we're going to now delve a little bit deeper into that definition of open data. So the open definition says essentially the principles that define what do I mean by open in relation to data and content. So let's take a look at the key features of what openness actually is. So availability and access. So the data must be available as a whole and at no more than a reasonable reproduction cost, preferably by downloading over the internet. The data must also be available in a convenient and modifiable form. So reuse and redistribution. So this is really important too. The data must be provided under terms that permit reuse and redistribution, including the intermixing with other data sets. And the data obviously must be machine readable. And that's going to be something we talk about a lot today, machine readable data. And universal participation, everyone must be able to use, reuse, and redistribute. There should be no discrimination against fields of endeavor or against persons or groups. So there can't be anything, for example, you can't use my data for any climate change research. There can't be any restrictions on how it's actually used. You can't be, for example, if we have open data here in-house with our own monitoring program, we can't say to somebody else, oh, you can't use that for an app that makes money or something. There can't be any sort of caveats of use. And this is coming, if anyone's interested, you can actually go to Open Knowledge International. A lot of governments use Open Knowledge International for both their definitions and shaping their own open data protocols. So Swim Guide is really just one example of an organization that can offer a better service to protect public health with open data. So again, just to kind of hammer that home, data's value is really when it's shareable, reusable, and accessible. So open data essentially means it's a higher quality data. So in order for it to be shareable, by default, the data has to be cleaner, it has to be more consistent, it has to be more organized. So straight away, you just have better data. So at Swim Drink Fish, we've been, as I mentioned before, we've been around since 2001, and we work on everything from drinking water to habitat for fish. But really, the main question that we get from the public is still, they're asking us verbatim, is it safe to swim? It's the question that spurred the creation of Swim Guide, and it's a question that people have for their water bodies around the world. People want to go swimming. They want to know where they can go. They want to know what's going on with the water, but the answer to that question is actually really hard to find in certain places, and it shouldn't be. So we launched in 2011 with essentially with Swim Guide. Essentially, our goal was to make access to water quality data easier, and that it should be easier to interpret the test results for people who wanted to go swimming without getting sick. So essentially, we wanted to help protect public health with better beach and water quality information. Swim Guide is a really simple concept. Essentially, we just go and find test results from monitoring bodies. So we find test results from government monitoring programs, as well as from community-based monitoring programs or citizen science, depending on how you term that. And we publish our results through our website, and we have apps for iOS and Android as having either met or failed to meet the local recreational water quality standard, so red or green. We are, as I mentioned, we're a website and a smartphone app for iOS and Android. We also have a widget, and we're available in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish, and hopefully more languages soon. And again, our idea is always that it will be, this is free and it's accessible, and we're trying to make it as accessible as possible for the public. It's free for the public to use to find water quality information, and it's free for anyone that would like to share their data on Swim Guide. So at the most basic level, the public can visit our website or download one of our apps and find a great a clean place to swim. So we have water quality for over 7,500 beaches in Canada, the US, Mexico, New Zealand, Australia, the Bahamas. And we launched in Europe last year with data for Ireland, France, and Denmark. And we just recently launched in Kenya in Africa. So to provide this service, we spend thousands of hours every summer and actually year-round compiling water quality information from websites, and a lot of them, less so these days, are using legacy technologies. We're calling phone hotlines, we're downloading spreadsheets, emails from health officers, just so that our users can have access to current beach water quality information and find a great place to swim. And it's worth it. To date, we have over 3 million people using SwimGuide. So the information we provide is clearly what people are looking for. In our first year, to give you an idea of our growth, we had 14,000 users total for the year. And now, at the height of the summer, that's what we're seeing, between 10 to 15,000 people a day using SwimGuide. We're expecting about 1 million users per year these days. So how do we do this? Essentially, our SwimGuide affiliates are really the heart and soul of SwimGuide. Without our affiliates, there's no SwimGuide. All data for SwimGuide's beaches, 7,000 beaches, is entered manually. So to date, we've accumulated approximately 3 million data points related to recreational water quality. So roughly each of our 7,500 beaches has at least 12 test results per season if it's monitored weekly. Some can have over 90 test results per season. So many beaches, especially in the southern US, the Mexico, Bahamas, and some places in New Zealand, they're sampling year-round. And if there's a predictive model that produces results more than once a day, we're looking at hundreds of test results per season, with sometimes new results appearing every 15 minutes. So each and every one of those 3 million data points in SwimGuide required a human being to find a test result, to interpret the test result as a pass or a fail against whatever the local standard is, log into Beach Manager, which is our database behind SwimGuide, in order to update their beaches with the latest water quality. That is thousands of hours of staff and volunteer time spent on data entry. And every single time there's a test result, that's been the process until 3 years ago, when it felt like a miracle. Georgia, the state of Georgia, and Toronto, they had open data. I usually get laughed at if I'm with anyone that is a developer or a coder, but they had what I like to term as these beautiful XMLs available. It was complete data sets. And essentially how this started was that the city of Toronto, they had an open data catalog, and it had an XML for their beach results, and the beach results, it was updated currently, essentially as test results came in, the XML was updated. So in 2016, we began to automatically pull Toronto's open data into SwimGuide. And this was a game changer, because Toronto monitors daily 11 beaches. So we have every single beach in Toronto's monitoring program has 90 samples at least per season. So that reduced so many hours of work. We also were approached by the state of Georgia, so Georgia's DNR, and they had open data, and they had hoped that we would actually pull it in and start updating SwimGuide with their data. So we also used their XML and started updating the coastal sites in Georgia. So what happened? It was immediate. We had our results up on SwimGuide as soon as they became available. So many times we were actually faster than the City of Toronto's website because we have a really fast refresh time. We were also often having our results up on SwimGuide before the email went out from Georgia's DNR to alert people that new test results were ready, or if there was any water quality issues. We were able to provide a better service simply by that action of updating, of automating SwimGuide. So what's happened is this summer we've actually automated the beaches for the beach guard states. Michigan, we're going to be automating Ohio and Illinois. Thanks to Alice McCarthy from USGS and Donnelly Dismore from Wisconsin's DNR, we were able to automate all the beaches in Wisconsin's beach health. We've updated as a pilot project, automated as a pilot project, Surfriders data for 5 chapters, and we're soon going to be bringing on all of the chapters in Surfrider. And we've also automated data for Auckland, New Zealand. Auckland Auckland Safe Swim has an API, and which has been phenomenal because they have a predictive model that updates every 15 minutes. So we were able to update all of their beaches. So this has been, as I said, saving us thousands of hours or hundreds of hours every year, and we were able to provide a better service. So how do you know if data is open? So I did go over some of that definition of openness, but I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this so everyone, we're all clear about exactly what I'm talking about. So open versus not open data. So open data is essentially the raw data set. And if any of you are collecting your own data, that would be what you have in your spreadsheet. So if you're collecting recreational water quality samples, everything from the beach ID, if there's a sample, a location ID, the time you took the sample, your water, the water temp, what method you were using, what substance you were sampling for, so E. coli, enterococcus, if you're doing cyano, the entire, with your test results, what kind of a sample it was a single sample, it was part of a geometric mean, it was a spatial mean, all of that is the raw data. Processed or refined data is not open. So that would be what you often see on beach sites where it's just a green or a red flag that just says passed or failed, that doesn't have all of the raw data that produced that answer. So machine readable. It has to be machine readable, and probably most of you are familiar with a CSV. You could download sort of an Excel or a Google Sheet as a CSV, XML, JSON. Those are all machine readable structured data formats. Human readable is, or unstructured data would be, say, a Word doc, PDF, scans, pictures. So you often see that embedded on websites. It's just a PDF or picture of the test results, maybe a photo taken of the actual spreadsheet itself. It needs to be discoverable. It's open. So the best example is an open data portal. You'll see that in a lot of big cities. A lot of governments have this, where they have an open data portal where anybody can go and access any number of data sets. Not open would be if people can't find it, if they can't access this. And we have seen that there's, to be fully open, it has to meet all of the criteria on the left-hand side. There is data that's available where it's raw and it's available in machine readable or structured data format, but if people can't access it, so say it's within a department or a set of clothes within, a company, that is not discoverable. And then reusable, as we talked about, legally and technically, it needs to be reusable. If the data has a finite or restricted use, again, that is not open. So I'm a very visual person, so I just wanted to kind of give a more visual understanding of what that means, human readable unstructured data versus open structured data. So on the left-hand side, that is actually the City of Toronto's, their beaches website. So it's not their open data portal, this is their website. And on the right-hand side, we have the results from Georgia, their XML. So human readable unstructured data. It has its purpose. I don't want to kind of give that human readable unstructured data isn't valuable. It really is. If a member of the public is coming here to find out what's going on today, just like for Swim Guide, I think this is a really great way to display what's going on with the data. People can see what day it was sampled on, what day it was posted on, what the E. coli count was. They have a really great map of where the beach starts and ends, and they can access the historical data of what's been going on. So this is great. However, that's the end of this data's journey, besides a person making a decision whether or not to go to the beach. This cannot be reused. And while it is discoverable, people can to access this. It's not raw. We don't have the complete data set, and it's not machine readable. So if we pop over to the right-hand side, this is, and you'll see if you're actually going through this, you could probably understand what this is. So this is the XML format, and it's essentially this. What's on the right-hand side can easily be pulled to populate the human readable unstructured data website, but the reuse of the data on the right-hand side is infinite. You can be combining this with other data sets. There's sort of the sky's the limit with this. It's machine readable. As you can see, it's actually also human readable. The other importance, and it's not defined often in definitions of open data and what's important for our data set is that when we're dealing with recreational water quality, is that there's the idea of timeliness, and we really need to talk about that because there are open data sets available for recreational water quality. However, if they're not shared as they become available, they lose their worth immediately. Recreational water quality data, like weather data, like earthquake information, like information about flights tracking, even information about, I live in a town with a lot of bridges that go up and down. If you don't have that information as it becomes available, it is essentially useless. Recreational water quality data is shared to help protect public health for contamination. And if it's shared, even a week later, especially what we see this a lot with health departments or with government bodies, it'll be shared at the end of the season, sort of as this report. That's, while it does have its use for research, it's not useful for the public. So for our purposes with recreational water quality, it really, really is important that when the open data that's shared openly, but also currently as it becomes available. So the benefits of better, faster, machine-readable recreational water quality data are far broader than our swim guide. So for example, open data helps feeding predictive models. It can be combined for investigations on sources of contamination. It helps with climate change research. The data collected by monitoring programs, it's incredibly precious, and it only increases in the value the more that it's shared. So this brings me back to the Open Data Standard project. So hundreds of municipalities, park organizations, nonprofits, they test the water for E. coli, for enterococci, for indicator bacteria, for cyano, other harmful pollutants on a daily or a weekly basis. And that data, as we were just talking about, it really does have to be shared as quickly and with as wide an audience as possible in order to really be useful and help people to avoid waterborne illnesses. Yet there's no standard for doing so. And due to poor public disclosure, people are getting sick every year, and we'll go through that at the end of the presentation with some actual quantification of that. So for 7 years, as we discussed, SwimGuide, our staff and our affiliates have been manually compiling water quality information and publishing it to SwimGuide. And we do this all year round. But I've been here since 2014, and I've seen a really amazing thing happen over my short time as the program manager. I've actually watched more and more counties and municipalities move from hotlines and maybe sort of guarded emails with test results to us to open data. Or sometimes this happens over the course of a season, and it's really phenomenal. Even last year, I was really proud to say that the province of Ontario, every single municipality that we have for the first time ever had their test results available online. So we're seeing more data available openly or partially open more than ever. But of those monitoring authorities that have machine-readable open data feeds, they are unique proprietary implementations. So that makes using their feeds, it's actually quite difficult. You can't combine them together. It requires essentially a customized implementation for each authority, and that creates a barrier to using their data. So just to give you I'll jump into the RCR grant in a second, but just to give you an idea of what that means, essentially, is that the difference between the XML in Toronto and the XML in Georgia, because they weren't using the same format for their XMLs, that caused our developer just to be able to do the automation about 6 to 8 hours of extra work just to sort of bring those online and be able to share it on SwimGuide. So that lack of standardization between the open data formats is a problem. It's a barrier. So we were trying to think of, before this gets sort of out of hand, before there's too much open data available and it's all available in sort of different formats, we really should provide something to health units to help them with this process, sort of as a guide. So we put in for a grant with the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, so CIRA.ca, to develop an open data standard for recreational water quality, because we believe a standard is critical as more and more of these recreational water quality data moves to being open. And the lack of the standard, it was really holding back the growth of interoperable the growth that interoperable data promised to deliver. So an open data standard, essentially it improves the quality and the timeliness of the information, and it helps to reduce some costs. So just to give you an idea of what we've been seeing, and this is meant to be a bit messy, is that there's been inconsistencies essentially in the way that the data is presented. So an open data standard is essentially a set of specifications or requirements on how some sets of data should be made publicly available. So it's essentially consistency in the way data is managed promotes the reuse of the data. So if you're looking at the sheet here, it's fantastic. We have Chicago, we've got Mississippi, we have Ottawa, we have Auckland, New Zealand, we have the F.A.I.R Foundation. All of them have open data. It's just because they're all presented in a different way, it's really inhibiting what open data is supposed to do. So again, consistency in the way that open data is managed and shares promotes the reuse of the data. So that's where open data standards come in. And they also almost were invented or brought to light as soon as the open data movement started. So they were hand in hand, open data standards and open data. Open data standards are meant to render data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And some of you might have heard that F.A.I.R data. That's where it comes from. It's about open data standards. So findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. That's with the aim of enhancing the integrity and reproducibility of data and accelerating scientific discovery. That's the F.A.I.R data principles. So the F.A.I.R principles will put specific emphasis on enhancing the ability of machines to automatically find and use the data, in addition to supporting its reuse by individuals. So this is really, it's almost like you have the door, which is open data, but the key is really those standards for the data sets. And the goal is high quality digital publications that facilitate and simplify the ongoing process of discovery, evaluation, and reuse in downstream studies. So we were actually, when we were starting this project, we reached out to the American Geophysical Union with their Enabling F.A.I.R Data project, and they've been a phenomenal resource for us, and I think for anyone that's interested just to learn more about the F.A.I.R data principles, and for any researchers not just for recreational water quality data, but finding out more about different standards that do exist for different data sets. So I'd encourage anyone to look them up and contact them. They're just phenomenal people to talk about your data with, if you like talking data, as I do. So again, I'm not sure everyone's background, but I did want to go over essentially the structures of data so everyone knows what I'm talking about, because sometimes if you're it can be a bit scary if you're more on the research rather than the data management side. So when we're looking at data, I've sort of made it broken it down into the different tiers. We have a schema, which is the data structure, and a schema essentially defines the elements that a file may contain. So it provides the specific structure for open data, so XML, JSON, or CSV. Metadata just essentially is a data about data. So metadata is a description and context of the data, such as the fields or the column headers. So if you look below, the metadata, I've sort of circled it there in the purple color, so location ID, location name, latitude, longitude, that's the metadata. It helps to organize, find, and understand data. So again, open data is better, cleaner, more organized data. And then the data itself is just the information. So everything that's below, in each of those rows below the column header, that is the data. So our Open Data Standard project, as I mentioned, we got the grant in 2017 from CIRA.ca to develop the Open Data Standard. And we knew that in-house at Swim Fish, though we have a long history of working with recreational water quality data, we weren't the experts, and we definitely didn't feel like we represented the entire community. So we brought a group of experts together, including the EPA's Research and Development Team, the River Network, the F.A.I.R Foundation, and Alberta's Health Services, and they helped us to drop the first version of the standard. And essentially, it was us sitting together for many days in a row, hashing out what the metadata should be. and what purpose this was going to serve. And once we had a really solid draft, we sent this the draft out far and wide to the Great Lakes Beach Association, essentially everyone in our network. I went to conferences all over the world introducing the standard and sort of begging for people to go in and weigh in. So that we can come up with a version 1 of this standard. So we had essentially the comment period ended in February of 2018, and then we started a pilot project with F.A.I.R Foundation. They had open data before many government organizations, counties, state programs in any of the countries where they're active. So we were really excited to work with them on this. And as I mentioned before, we were able to, they took on our standard for their open data, and we were able to automate 5 of their chapters. And the plan is that soon we'll have all 45 of their Blue Water Task Force chapters data on SwimGuide using our standard. And we launched the standard in June of 2018, and since then it's been refined. We know that it'll keep being updated over time, and we're always asking people to come and look and make sure that it is sort of as up to date and relevant as possible. We know that there's a lot of changes happening in the recreational water quality monitoring world. There's always new methods being developed. There's things to contend with, such as there's more cyanobacteria monitoring. How do we account for other parameters being measured? So we're always kind of keeping an eye or ear to the ground to make sure that the standard, the new versions are coming out as appropriate. So we're really hoping that the standard is going to increase data exchange, improve public awareness of water quality, and aid researchers trying to protect recreational water quality. The initiative will reduce the number of people getting sick from contact with polluted water and increase the number of environmental protection plans for communities affected by pollution. So if anyone would like to take a look at that now, the best place, if you are familiar with data, you can go to GitHub if you have a GitHub account. So it's swimjigfish/open data, and you can go see the latest version is actually version 1.01, and you can go there and see there's examples, there's the tech document, the README, and it'll give you essentially the background as well as an explanation of what all of the fields are. And again, these fields, all the metadata was really discussed, but we're always hoping that more people are taking a look at it and giving suggestions or any comments. One thing we did notice as we've been working on this is that essentially because this recreational water quality monitoring is pretty consistent around the world, we've actually just gotten a lot of support for this. We haven't gotten too much sort of discussion about the standard itself or sort of pushback. It's been more or less accepted as is, with usually suggestions for new methods and making sure we're kind of up to date with those. So we're really excited that it has been more or less embraced where we've shown it off. But please do take the time to go visit there. And there's also, if this is a bit new, you can also access the standard on our website. I have the address at the end of the presentation, but it's recreationalwater.ca. So that gives sort of more of a definition of open data, and it's a bit more accessible for the public, for those of you that are new to open data. So before I do wrap, I did want to spend some time though on some of the challenges that we've encountered on this sort of open data standard journey. So when we were developing the standard, it was brought to our attention, and it was something that we noticed, that it's not that people or organizations or government bodies are necessarily against open data. There was actually a lot of obstacles that were there for both, community monitoring groups, government bodies, counties, municipalities that were monitoring the water to actually share their data in an open, machine-readable format. So we did a lot of research. We had our own, sort of our knowledge. We're working pretty closely with all the health units. And we also spent some time doing some research last summer, and just to understand what was going on with data management for recreational water quality monitoring, and what were those obstacles that folks were facing. So essentially, the main ones were a lack of good data management tools. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there's a lot of practice, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of support for the actual sample collection, processing methods, as well as sharing the data with the public. So we're seeing that more and more in places. There's a lot of focus there, but there's not always the tools in place or the funding in place for the actual data management. And that's not just something that we see in recreational water quality monitoring programs. That's in a lot of research programs, especially with environmental data. There just isn't, it's not built in to sort of the funding plans or just the the summer plans. In-house capacity and limitations with knowledge, technological limitations. That's been another barrier. So first, I could speak for some. I've been in some of the health units. Even the computers that they have, the way things are being managed, even if they'd want to, they wouldn't be able to. There could be restrictions just on privacy and sharing, or just they do not have the tools in house. It's been pretty difficult for some health units and programs to adapt current data management systems to a new model. So moving from what they've done for, it could be 10, 20 years to a new system, that's a tall order, and it requires, funds, it requires people. And funding, again, I'm going to keep going back to this. There's a lack of funding, or there's funding restrictions on data management itself. So when we were doing this investigation, we actually saw that everyone that's doing recreational water quality data does have, the hard copies, those sort of field sheets that you take out with you to collect the data in the field. So they have hard copies. Most folks have it on saved on their computer, so in a Word doc, in Excel. But that's where you start to see a huge drop off in how the way the data is actually managed. So even getting it from the field, from sheets, from like an actual hard file in in an office, to even like a cloud-based like Google Drive, that's a huge step. We were seeing basically 100% of both the Canadian and the U.S. Health units that we had approached for this study said that they had those two things, but as soon as we asked about like relational databases, cloud-based, anything like that, there was essentially just a handful that had that capacity. So we really wanted to recognize that, because we know that asking everyone to open data, it's not simply an unwillingness. There's actually a lot of obstacles to that, and that's what we're here for. We're trying to make that a little bit easier. So what can you do today? So if you don't already have open data, there's actually some really easy things you can do. And it's not, you don't have to be a developer, you don't have to know code to be able to do these things. So the first thing you should do is you should always ensure your data is online, not kept on a computer, just on your computer and with some backup, or on paper, definitely not on paper. So always make sure that it's someplace at least cloud-based, at least on a Google Drive for your data. We've heard nightmares with even health units losing all the data because, it was just kept on anything on a USB, it was kept on paper, somebody moved it and they lost all of their data. So again, everything is online, so that's something that everyone should be able to do. Clean up your spreadsheets, so make sure that they're organized, they're clean, and they're consistent. And I showed you that how just essentially tabular data, everything should be in columns with headers, and I'll speak to that a little bit more at the end of some assistance that we can provide, and share it. The data, if everyone puts a lot of work into collecting this data, but if it's not shared, it almost didn't happen. So this data is extremely precious, not just for beachgoers, for researchers, for sort of the sky's the limit of what we can do with recreational water quality data. So make sure you just share it in an accessible, machine-readable format, and everyone can download their spreadsheets as a CSV, and that meets the definition of open, machine-readable data. So just again, I'm really visual, so everyone knows what I'm talking about. When I'm saying organize your data sheets, this is what I mean. So tabular data sets, so organized into rows and columns, and download it it should be downloadable as a CSV. That's something you can do right away today. If you see below, that's an unstructured sheet, so it's not organized into rows and columns, and you can't really download it as a usable CSV. It'd be sort of I guess mangled a little bit. So you'd have to, so really we're moving all of our own data sheets into this. We're trying to follow our sort of do as I say, not as I do. We're actually doing as we say now. Our data from our own monitoring hubs here in the Great Lakes, everything is organized this way. And I'm very, very happy to send our template that we are using around. And it does follow our SIMJIGFISH open data standard in essentially a sheet format rather than JSON, which is our format there. So I am going to wrap soon in just one more slide, but I want to bring it back to essentially why my organization, like many others, we're champions not just of recreational water quality monitoring, but of open data and sharing current results. So there's a lot of love for the rich water resources we have here in Canada and in the US. And just quickly, the National Survey on Recreational and Environment says that every year, over 60% of Americans visit a marine beach, rivers, lakes, and ponds to swim and engage in other recreational water quality activities. And most of those 142 million people that do so, they do this on multiple times a year, because essentially if you go once, you're sort of addicted. People love swimming, and it's the same in Canada. It's about 60% of our population also swims and visits our marine and freshwater beaches on an annual basis. We know that there are hazards, I think from this crowd. I'll just review them quickly, but when people are heading out to these natural untreated water bodies, they're at risk of getting sick from contamination. And we still have we've managed to tackle a lot of the contamination, but we still have a lot of sewage and stormwater going into the water, and that is really sort of the main causes of contamination and illness in folks these days. So just to give some numbers, in Canada, it's about 200 billion liters of untreated sewage are going into our waterways every year. In the US, it's about 4.5 trillion liters of untreated sewage, and this is coming from wastewater treatment plants, combined sewers, septic malfunctions, stormwaters, and people can get sick. And it hadn't really been quantified until a couple of years ago. But just to give you some numbers, and again, why we're working on an open data standard. Our open data standard was created to help us move the needle towards that goal of swimmable, drinkable, fishable water for everyone. And I'd like to end here. When recreational water quality data is clearly and promptly communicated with the public, they can actually take measures to protect their health and the health of their families and friends. Recreational water quality monitoring, it's key to understanding and tracking sewage and stormwater contamination, and then we can identify and remediate contaminated waters. So, however, it can be really, really difficult for the public to get an answer to that question. Is it safe to swim? So that's what we're trying to do by providing open, current recreational water quality data. So just to give you some numbers, and this is a study that came out in 2018 by the University of Illinois. We had heard that number of 3.5 million people getting sick every year from the EPA, but they combined a lot of different research from EPA and other major national studies and found that it actually had been quite lowballed. We're seeing of the 4.04 billion surface water recreational events that occur every year, it results in 90 million illnesses, and it costs between $2.2 and $3.7 billion a year. So of about 65% of those 90 million illnesses, it results in a contact with a healthcare practitioner or evaluation in an emergency department. And while adults tend to experience sort of the more mild illnesses, it's the kids between 0 to 10 that experience the majority of the moderate to more severe illnesses. In Canada, we have less information about this, but it's about 400,000 people a year getting sick from contaminated recreational waters. So this data, we have 3 million users on SwimGuide. People are going swimming and they're looking for this information. So the better we can do at providing it to them, the more of a service it will be. So good data management. As I said, I was going to harp on this a lot, and stewardship is not a goal in itself, but it really is, it's the precondition to supporting knowledge, discovery, and innovation. So by working together towards shared common goals, the valuable data produced by our beach monitoring programs will gradually achieve the critical goals of open knowledge and fair data, fairness. So anyone that's interested in weighing in our open data standard, as I mentioned before, please visit our GitHub. It's there at the bottom here, GitHub swimmingfish/open data, recreationalwater.ca. That's the website. You can actually link to GitHub from there. We're at swimguide.org, and my email is here. And as I mentioned before, please contact me if you want to discuss your own data, if you want to get support to make it open, and if you have any questions that we don't answer here today during the Q&A period. Okay, I think that I'm happy to hand it back to Candace and to take some questions.